June 17, 2016. 150 heavily armed sicarios raided the home of El Chapo's mother with one mission in mind: to kill. And while they were unsuccessful, this was just one of the many times brutal cartels targeted the families of rival drug lords. Juan Francisco El Brujo Herrera. July 12, 2020, a Sinaloa cartel drug lord, Juan Francisco, was executed alongside with his wife and his little daughter by members of the Caborca cartel. The name Caborca might not be familiar when mentioning the top cartels in Mexico. This criminal organization has been a longtime ally of the Sinaloa cartel. The head of Caborca, Rafael Caro Quintero, was good friends with Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. They worked as an arm of extra muscle for the Sinaloa cartel and did all the bidding of El Chapo. One of those biddings included the killing of United States DEA agent Enrique Kiki Camarena. In 1984, the Mexican authorities raided a 1,000-hectare ranch known as El Búfalo in the state of Chihuahua, owned by Caro Quintero. This raid was so massive that the authorities reportedly burned down more than 10,000 tons of marijuana worth more than $160 million. Now, the agent, Camarena, was working undercover and was said to be the one responsible for giving Mexican authorities the coordinates to the ranch. This raid wasn't just a loss for both cartels, but it somehow angered every single cartel and drug lord in Mexico, meaning one thing: Agent Camarena needed to be executed. And while there's a whole lot of other information to this story, let's save it for another day. The main thing is, Quintero was the man directly involved in this murder, and the US wanted nothing more than to put Quintero behind bars. Now fast forward a few years later, El Chapo was arrested and extradited to the US. After his extradition, El Chapo's sons, Alfredo Guzman Salazar and Ivan Archibaldo Salazar, the El Chapitos, and Ismael Almayo Zambada, took over control of the Sinaloa cartel. But it also led to a fallout with Caro Quintero and his cartel. At the time of El Chapo's arrest, both the Sinaloa and Caborca cartels were teaming up to take down the cartel Jalisco Nueva Generacion, aka the CJNG. But one thing led to another, and Quintero's nephew, Santiago Eduardo, was killed by members of the Sinaloa cartel. And to be honest, it was a bit unfair because Quintero was the same guy who took the hit for the murder of the DEA agent. The same guy who took the hit for numerous murders for the Sinaloa cartel, and who also became wanted by the FBI for his numerous hits for the Sinaloa cartel and El Chapo. Yet the Sinaloa cartel stabbed Quintero in the back and killed his nephew. Many say if El Chapo was still in power, that would have never happened. While we'll never know if that's true or not, what Quintero did as revenge was catastrophic. He enacted his revenge on the high-ranking Sinaloa cartel drug lord, Juan Francisco El Brujo Herrera, and his family. El Brujo is that guy you don't want to mess with. He was arrested in 2010 for attempted homicide, and in Nacosari, a year later, he was arrested by the Mexican police for possession of narcotics. However, due to El Chapo's influence on the Mexican government, El Brujo just kept getting away with it. But on June 17, tragedy struck. 10 a.m. at Guaymas, Sonora, Mexico. El Brujo, his wife Nayeli, their two daughters, and a few other people were traveling in a Ford van when out of nowhere a taxi pulled up filled with sicarios. These sicarios pulled up with high-caliber armory and massacred the van with bullets, with El Brujo being the main target. El Brujo, already suffering from gun wounds, couldn't help but run into a light bulb. His wife and two daughters also passed away, and a few of the other people in the van sustained life-threatening injuries. This attack on El Brujo officially ended the alliance between the Sinaloa and Caborca cartels, leading to a turf war. Santiago Eduardo. Just a few minutes ago, we talked about how the nephew of the Caborca cartel's leader, Rafael Caro Quintero, was forced to kill an entire family. As I narrated the story, did you ever just stop and wonder how Quintero's nephew was actually killed? Well, let me tell you about it. Santiago was the 26-year-old son of Rafael's brother, Ruben Payan Quintero, alias El Gringo. El Gringo was a notorious drug lord, working alongside his brother for the Caborca cartel. There are no signs that Santiago followed in his father's footsteps, but his father's crimes were enough to make him a huge target for almost every cartel in Mexico. The Caborca cartel is one of the newest cartels in Mexico, and their push for dominance is what I'd call daring. They're heavily involved in distributing hard drugs like methamphetamine and have dipped their hands into other pots of crime like extortion, kidnapping, and arms trafficking. They operate in the region of Caborca, which is a city located in the northwestern part of Sonora, near the border with the US. But apart from the things they do, what really made this cartel appear daring in the face of other cartels is how fearless they are when it comes to clashing with other cartels. Like these guys have clashed with the Sinaloa cartel, Los Salazar, being a faction of the Sinaloa cartel, and even the almighty CJNG. What they fail to realize is that when it comes to operating a cartel in Mexico, there are two wars you must fight: the war against the Mexican government and the war against rival cartels. Sadly, they took one more seriously than the other, given the reason why most of their leaders, including Santiago's father, have been arrested multiple times by Mexican authorities. June 24, 2015, Santiago became the bait for rival cartels after his father was arrested by the Mexican Navy while on his ranch in Mocorito. However, for many years, Santiago managed to remain hidden until attending just one party that changed his life forever. Santiago and his friends were at a party having fun and, living their best lives. However, at around midnight, a group of gunmen showed up at this party and started blasting anyone in sight. Santiago tried escaping in his Jeep Rubicon parked around the corner. He did escape from the scene, but immediately realized that he was the main target of the attack after gunmen chased him down the city. They eventually caught up with him and shot him multiple times through his side window. His body was covered in blood, and when medics arrived, he was taken to the KEMSI clinic. But Santiago didn't make it. He died at exactly 11:15 a.m. the next day. Cesar Carrillo Leyva, August 13, 2020. The son of Amado Carrillo Fuentes, aka the Lord of the Skies, was brutally murdered right in front of his garage by hitmen sent by El Chapo's sons. Amado Carrillo was one of the first ever drug lords in Mexico, and the man who started transporting cocaine shipments through cargo planes, earning him the nickname the Lord of the Skies. But Cesar's road to such a tragic end began with his father and his dealings with the Guadalajara cartel. Amado was sent to learn about the shipment of cocaine from his uncle in Chihuahua, Mexico. Later, Amado would work with Pablo Escobar in the Cali cartel, smuggling drugs from Colombia to Mexico and the U.S. He also worked with the Arellano Felix family and the Beltran Leyva organization before opening his own empire with the Juarez cartel. He had built a $25 billion empire before he died on July 4, 1997, from a botched plastic surgery. Now, with his death came a long war between the Juarez cartel and other cartels, leading his two sons to step up and walk in his footsteps. Around the 2000s, the Juarez cartel was in this intense war with the Sinaloa cartel for control of El Paso Juarez Border Plaza. At this time, Cesar Carrillo was still low-key because his father's men gave him heavy protection from Mexican authorities. His elder brother Vicente Carrillo Leyva was arrested on April 1st, 2009 for charges related to drug trafficking, leaving Cesar the responsibility to control his father's entire drug network. This was also around the time that the violence began to decline, as the Sinaloa cartel gained control of this border plaza. So on one hand, he had to protect this border from El Chapo and his men, and on the other, he was trying to maintain a low profile. The bad part about this story is that Cesar wasn't successful at being a drug lord. In 2011, his name went public after several banners were placed across the state of Chihuahua announcing the emergence of the new Juarez cartel. The banners stated that Cesar had assumed control of the criminal group, but 7 years later, he was arrested by the Mexican Navy and released almost immediately after, due to the cartel's influence in the Mexican government. This influence also helped Cesar negotiate a release for his brother, Vincent, in 2018, and his other brothers, Luis Fernando Carrillo and Juan Carrillo Leyva. Luis Fernando was arrested in 2019 for being connected to the murder of Sonora model Amber Dolores, but was given a pretty mild sentence. August 13, 2020, Cesar was murdered in the municipality of Nabolato, Sinaloa. Minutes before his death, a car was said to have been stationed right outside his house for several hours. As they spotted Cesar attempting to leave his house through his garage, they drove by and shot him multiple times. Now, Cesar didn't exactly pass away immediately. There was a bit of a delay before he could get help, but when the police and medics got to the scene, Cesar had passed away from internal bleeding and injuries. Local journalists say that the murder was reportedly ordered by Los Chapitos, the sons of former Sinaloa cartel boss Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. Los Chapitos, or the Little Chapos, is the name given to Ivan Archibaldo Guzman Salazar and Jesus Alfredo Guzman Salazar, alongside their stepbrothers, Ovidio Guzman Lopez and Joaquin Guzman Lopez. For some reason, the news of Cesar's death reached the morning conference of Mexico's president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador. The president then asked the Secretary of Security and Citizen Protection to respond to the news of his death, which they did. A double SPC official confirmed that a murder occurred and that his administration was one step closer to bringing down the major drug lords across every cartel and around Mexico. Edgar Guzman Lopez. May 8, 2008, El Chapo's chosen successor, Edgar Guzman, was gunned down in his vehicle after 500 bullets were fired at him by sicarios of rival cartels. But before I go into those details of his unfortunate demise, I need you to understand why his death was mere karma for the sins of his father. We all know El Chapo and the evil things he's done to people in Mexico, but today we're not concerned with all those details. The only people we're concerned about are the members of the Beltran Leyva cartel, because they're the ones responsible for the death of El Chapo's son. Now, cartels clash. That's not a new thing. But the reason why this cartel had to go after El Chapo's son is due to El Chapo's selfish acts towards him. You see, El Chapo struck a secret deal with the DEA and Mexican law enforcement. The deal was that he would hand over classified intelligence on whereabouts of top drug lords like himself, but in turn he and his organization would get immunity from the government. That deal led to the arrest of Alfredo Beltran Leyva, a top commander in the Beltran Leyva cartel. As if that wasn't enough, the DEA was able to crack down and arrest 11 high-profile Beltran Leyva hit squad members. These arrests were too surreal, and it became obvious that El Chapo gave them up, although it isn't formally documented that El Chapo did this. He had issues with Alfredo, and was one of the few people who knew his whereabouts. So, immediately after Alfredo was arrested, the remaining Beltran Leyva brothers declared a formal war with El Chapo and the Sinaloa cartel, and their first target was Edgar Guzman Lopez. Born in 1986, Edgar was El Chapo's chosen successor, but unlike his other sons, El Chapo kept him out of the family business till he finished school. But by 2008, he had grown his first gram of cocaine paste, and he decided to do business for the cartel. And maybe the biggest mistake El Chapo made was not putting Edgar through the business properly, because Edgar wasn't so street smart. Now, El Chapo warned Edgar not to leave Mexico due to the threats that he had received from the Beltran Leyva cartel, but Edgar chose to disobey his father. He left Mexico for Chicago, Illinois, with his cousin Cesar Ariel Lora Guzman and his girlfriend to sell the gram of cocaine paste that he had. After they were successful, they flew back to Culiacan, where things didn't exactly end well for him. Edgar, his cousin, and his girlfriend were traveling in a red SUV back to El Chapo's base. However, they stopped at a shopping center to get a few groceries. When they got out, immediately about 40 soldiers brutally fired shots at both Edgar and his cousin, sending their souls far away from their bodies. A bazooka was even fired to make sure that they were dead. Reports say that more than 450 bullets were fired at the scene, but locals say the number is way higher. What made matters even worse is that the Beltran Leyva organization never claimed responsibility for the attack. They pushed the narrative that it was actually El Chapo's men that killed Edgar, mistaking him for a man named El Guacho. But El Chapo knew deep down that his men would never do such a thing. So for his revenge, he first gave Edgar a befitting farewell by buying all the roses in Culiacan for the burial. Then, he ordered the killing of over 116 people in Culiacan before the end of May 2008. Then in June of the same year, over 128 were killed, and over 143 in July. But no matter how many people El Chapo ordered to be killed, it didn't take away the pain of losing his son during his burial. Edgar's mother, Griselda Lopez Perez, gave a powerful speech that got the attention of everyone present. She said, "I am tired as a mother of having my children pointed out as drug traffickers. I've lost a son to the wars they provoked." Consuelo Lora. Being the most notorious drug lord in all of Mexico, it only makes sense that El Chapo's family members would have been targeted multiple times by rivals. One of the most striking attempts at a member of El Chapo's household was that of his mother, Consuelo Lora. Now, we all know El Chapo's devotion to his hometown and his mother. The famed drug lord was abused by his father, and his mother raised him and his 11 brothers in poverty. She stayed in a small town with fewer than 100 residents when her son reached the top ranks of the Sinaloa cartel. Now, this town is known as La Tuna. La Tuna is located in the municipality of Badiraguato, a part of the Golden Triangle. In case you don't know, the Golden Triangle is El Chapo's fortress, which no one, and I mean no one, can access. This Golden Triangle is an area between Durango, Chihuahua, and Sinaloa that has become one of the greatest producers of opium in the Americas and a nightmare for the US and the DEA. However, El Chapo felt La Tuna was where his mother would be safest. Sadly, he was wrong. June 17, 2016, 150 sicarios stormed into this town and broke into factions to ambush Consuelo Lora. Good for her, she wasn't home at the time, but these sicarios went on to raid that house. They stole 3 luxurious cars, 3 motorcycles, and also cut telephone lines. Some other factions of these sicarios decided to raid the town and even mercilessly drag a man outside of his home to kill him on the street. So which cartel carried out this gruesome attack? Well, it was none other than the Beltran Leyva organization and Fausto Isidro Meza Flores, aka Chapito. Now, the US government sees Chapito as a large-scale trafficker since 2000, running his operations out of Guasave, a northern Sinaloa state. But when the BLO and El Chapo split in 2008, Chapito Isidro remained with the BLO, acting as a high-level hitman and leading a group called Mazatlecos. Chapito Isidro is also believed to head a group called Oficina, consisting of members of the Familia Michoacana, the Zetas, the Gulf Cartel, and the BLO. Now this just means one thing and one thing only. These guys were out to kill El Chapo's mom at any cost. Thankfully, she wasn't home.